Tonight is a little different. We had a meeting. Caleb Altmeyer came, and he purchased what was, if you've ever been into the core of downtown Spokane, Deja Vu Strip Club. They wanted to buy the building to turn it around so that its focus was helping people that were caught up in the sex industry. People that were by their own volunteer activities engaged. Some people that had been coerced into these activities and that got trapped sometimes on drugs, and they are being abused. And so Caleb and his team wanted to turn that whole thing around and use that facility to minister to these men and women that got caught up in this horrible lifestyle. And so I really wanted to hear from him. And so we brought him in, we heard from him, and then we put together a tour for the senior pastors of Kootenai County, of which I missed because at the time, as I recall, I was not feeling well. And so I didn't get to go on the tour. And so I thought, well, I missed everything, and so now I have to bring him here and have him stand in front of you. And the reason is because I want to help him. We already sent him a check for $1,000 to just support their ministry. We're giving him another check for $1,000 tonight. So we're already invested. We want to invest, but I wanted you to know what he's doing. But because of this conversation, and because of what they're doing, and because of some recent conversation in our own county, I wanted to also have our sheriff show up here. And so I called Bob Norris, who is a personal friend to me, and asked him if he would come and just kind of give us a snapshot of our community and what we're dealing with in our own community. Because when Caleb is serving people in Spokane, Eastern Washington, there is always the possibility of young people being groomed from our area, any kind of activity that might draw them over into that direction. And so I wanted to kind of hear from Bob about what's actually happening in our community. And so our first guest tonight is going to be Sheriff Bob Norris. And so would you welcome our Sheriff Bob Norris?
Good evening. Welcome. When you leave here tonight, I would like for you to have an understanding of what I believe, based on what's happening here in Kootenai County, what are the biggest threats to our youth and our young adults. So, one of the biggest questions that I get when I am going throughout this county is, Sheriff, do we have human trafficking here in Kootenai County? And I'll say, well, what's your definition of human trafficking? And they'll say, well, are we having kids kidnapped or running away and being forced into a sex trade, or being molested or being sexually abused in Los Angeles, Portland, or Seattle, or any other big city? I said, no, we don't have that. I have reviewed the last 24 months, and I have the statistics with me, but that's not where our threat is. I will tell you where our threat is. The biggest threat that is facing our Kootenai County youth and young adults is this cell phone right here. This cell phone, social media, enticing girls and boys is the number one threat we have here in Kootenai County. We have situations where sextortion is going on. And this is a typical case of what happens here in Kootenai County. They meet somebody in one of these online chat rooms or on social media, and they say, hey, I'm a 16-year-old, 17-year-old student going at Lewiston High, and I would really love if you would just send me a picture of your feet. And then the girl who lives in Kootenai County says, well, I don't know about that. Well, I'll give you $50. So they have this Cash Apps and they have the Apple Pay, and she sends a picture of her feet. And then they say, hey, do you have a picture in a bikini? Because I would love to have a picture of you in a bikini. And then they send a picture of the bikini, and for $100, let me give you $100 if you give me that bikini pic. She does it. And then the 17-year-old, who's really a 40-year-old living in Spokane or living in Seattle or even around this world, says, if you would just show me your breast, I will give you $300. She goes, $300 and all I have to do is that? So then she does it. And she sends it to him. And then he wants more. He says, well, I want you to be naked and I want you to do something for me while you're laying on your bed. She goes, I'm not going to do that. And then he threatens to say, if you don't do that, I am going to take these pictures you've already sent me and I'm going to put them all over the internet. That's what's happening. That's what's happening on this cell phone throughout the United States, including right here in Kootenai County. We don't have that definition of what when I go around this county, and probably brought to the forefront with some of the specials and the movies that are being made on this, but we don't have that problem. A vast majority of the definition of human trafficking includes abductions and includes kidnappings, but all of the kidnappings and abductions that we've had have been by a relative, and there has been no sex molestation or sex abuse whatsoever. Vast majority of them. We've had some prostitution cases here. Yep, that falls under the umbrella of human trafficking. So it's important when I ask these questions, and I ask, well, what is your definition of human trafficking? Because it's such a broad umbrella. So, I can't tell you enough. This cell phone for our youth is addictive, and it's luring mostly girls, but boys too. And they are increasing their risk of being a sexual assault victim in the future, and they're increasing their risk of falling into a sex trade, because when you start doing this, and then the psychology of it for that young lady or that young man, they become depressed because they feel like they're being pressured, and there's a whole nother dynamic that's occurring. This cell phone is absolutely the biggest threat that our youth and our young people are facing. It is a destructive invention. Social media is a very destructive invention. They're now, instead of going outside and enjoying things outside, they're staying inside and are on this phone. So, yes, we do have sextortion going on. We do have that going on, and we need to make a better relationship with the community to make these victims and their parents feel comfortable that, hey, you need to tell us about these things, because a lot of these things don't go reported. So we need to, and I am probably the most accessible sheriff with this sheriff's office, we want to partner with you. And we want you to feel comfortable if this is happening to your loved one, to feel comfortable enough to say, hey, can we come in and talk to you? So yes, those are the types of things that are happening here. What is another threat to our youth and our young adults? Fentanyl. And there's a nexus to both of these. There's a nexus between this cell phone, about this behavior, and substance abuse. So substance abuse in general is a big threat to our community. Fentanyl happens to be really cheap, and it's unregulated to a large degree in the state of Washington. You can get fentanyl now for $3, $4, $5 a tablet. It is a destructive drug. All substance abuse in general. And once you get depressed and once you go down this journey, your substance abuse is more likely to occur. So, substance abuse in general, but fentanyl seems to be the current drug of choice, most likely because of the cost. It's really cheap right now and it's ready available. It's a central nervous system depressant, so it slows everything down. And that's what I want you to leave here with tonight. I want you to leave here with tonight that this cell phone, and when you choose to give it to your loved one or have it available, is crucial. It is very critical. That is a deep, and what these people do, these 40, 50, 60-year-olds that are obtaining these pictures, they're selling them on the dark web, and that's what the goal is to get these pictures, and then they sell them on the dark web. And yes, we do have that. Absolutely, we have that. And we are part of the Attorney General's Internet Crimes Against Children's Task Force. We fully cooperate with all of those investigations. And there is not a peace officer in Kootenai County that doesn't want to protect your kids, period. It's our first and foremost responsibility. We will protect our children and our young adults at any cost. So, all right. So, who can name one of the biggest threats that are facing our youth and young adults? That's right. What's the other threat? Substance abuse and fentanyl. So,
according to the Polaris Project, supported by the U.S. government, the United States has 16,554 individuals that have been identified as likely being victims of trafficking. The UN has noted that only 1 in 100 captives will ever escape, making it probable that exponentially more than we know are trafficked every year. While the Northwest is often known for its coffee and outdoor appeal, such as rivers, lakes, and mountains, what is less known is that in the Northwest since 2007, over 6,000 victims of trafficking have been locally identified. And according to the Fulcrum Institute, Washington State has the 6th largest concentration of past and current sex trafficking victims in the United States. Helping captives exists to honor God by providing opportunities for freedom and safety to those exploited by sex trafficking. Originally, Helping Captives provided a long-term care program for survivors all over the United States and partnered with other cities in need. Through those amazing partnerships, we have had women fly in from all over the country to receive our services. However, over the last 2 years, our organization has seen an uptick in local calls and walk-ins from women in our own city seeking emergency and stabilization care. After talking with community leaders, board members, and first responders, we decided to do our best to answer the call. In order to provide the additional needed services for our community, we've been looking for a facility in town that would meet the need on a bus line, and it needed to be easy to find, and it needed to provide enough square footage for current and future office employees, counselors, case managers, and future outpatient staff. Shortly after expanding our reach and launching our updated services, an opportunity presented itself in the form of a facility that had been known for the exploitation of women in our area, the Deja Vu Strip Club. This building, once a vibrant movie theater for families in our community, declined from a place that showed mainstream movies to adult films in the 70s and eventually was turned into a strip club, which it has remained until recently. At first, we weren't too sure about the space. But the more we prayed about it, it was apparent that not only did the building check all our practical needs, we could honor God by turning this building from a place of exploitation into a place of healing in His name. Early on in the process, we had the opportunity to receive full funding for the building, but it would have required us to take Christ out of our programming, which we simply could not do. That's why we're reaching out to you, our community, to help us make this happen. The success of this project would mean even more women would have the opportunity to safely heal, grow, and enter into a whole new life. God is a God of redemption and healing. This isn't just about redeeming an old building. It is a symbol and an opportunity to redeem lives and set captives free.
All right, can you guys hear me? Thank you guys so much for coming and hearing my heart and hearing my concern about some things that we need to look at as a community, some things that we can address now before it gets too out of control. I am definitely, it's awesome to be able to come over to the Promised Land once in a while and get out of the other side of the border. I feel like Moses all the time, where I literally live like right next to the border, and God's just like, nope, you're stuck here. And I'm like, come on. I want to go over there and shoot my gun that can have 30 mags, 30 rounds in my magazine. So, but there's some awesome stuff happening. God is doing some amazing things. And first I want to tell you guys, hey, listen, I'm not here to sensationalize the problem, okay? I'm not going to come and tell you guys there's millions of kids being trafficked in your community. If there's 3 being trafficked in your community, that's a problem, right? I'm not here to. We don't want to sensationalize it. There's enough bad things happening that we can just talk straight and be honest with where we're at and what's going on. So. Our organization is called Helping Captives, and originally our name was HRC Ministries. I named it after my grandfather, my dad, and myself, and my thought was that we were going to help reach our city, and that was kind of the goal of it, right? Help reach our city. It did not mean Hillary Rodham Clinton, for those that decided not to donate to us in 2016. Thanks for that. So, but... You know, we felt like God wanted us to reach our city and kind of help get the church just more involved in the community. And being an Altmeyer, growing up with a family that's been really involved in just working with homeless, that's just been something that I grew up around. My father worked at the Union Gospel Mission for 30 years, so my first memories as a kid are like playing t-ball in a homeless shelter. All of my parents' best friends don't have teeth and smell like cigarettes, and that was just how I grew up. And so for us, we wanted to help the church get more involved in the community, but something happened in 2000, I think about 2015-ish. We had somebody really near and dear to our heart that was actually my babysitter come and tell my father her story, and she had been trafficked from the age of 6 by her parents. Her parents were actually into witchcraft and into Satanism, and as part of the rituals, she would be sold. And I remember going back and talking to my staff at the time. I was running a youth center, and found out that one of my staff had a very similar story. And so we kind of sat there. My dad was Randy. I'm Phil's nephew. I'm not Phil's kid. Randy is my father. But we sat down and thought, let's open a house and let's see if we can help people coming out of trafficking. And this was in Spokane, and we opened a house, and we had 21 women go through our house in 9 months. And we were originally thinking maybe 2 or 3. And there was some stuff we learned in that. And the biggest thing was we do have a problem, but we need professional staff. We need professional care. And we now have that. We now have staff. We have 24-hour rotating staff. We have professional counselors on staff. We didn't want to just grab somebody and throw them into a host home. Almost everybody we're working with is coming out of fentanyl and out of a serious drug addiction. And they're either get into trafficking through drug addiction or they get trafficked and end up in drug addiction. And so at some point, we're going to run into that. And so we ended up doing that. We are a Christian anti-trafficking agency. We serve Spokane, Washington, and the North Idaho regions, and we exist to honor God by providing freedom and safety to those exploited by sex trafficking. And it just is what it is. We've had to turn down money because of our faith. It just is what it is. We're a Christian organization. We're unapologetic about that. And we're just never not going to have Christ in our programming. And so if that's something that you don't like, there's other organizations for you. But if you love Jesus and you believe that he's the way, the truth, and the life, then we're your organization. And that's just what we believe at the core of who we are. And our story, I kind of briefly talked to you guys about it. We started as an outreach organization, really helping kids, do lots of food, a lot of food distribution. And I thought we would just have that one little house, and that would be kind of part of our bigger organization. And what's ended up happening is as time has gone on, more and more time was focused in the anti-trafficking department. And then 2 years ago, we just felt like God say, hey, now's the time. We shut everything down that wasn't trafficking related and thought, let's be the best anti-trafficking organization that we can be in the United States and in the Northwest. And let's try and be that lighthouse and try and be a place that people can come and get healing. And then let's change our name to Helping Captives instead of HRC, so I don't have to explain to everybody what HRC means. And so we changed our name to Helping Captives, and I hope that is simple enough for you guys to understand. So that's kind of been our journey. We do three things. We do prevention, intervention, and recovery services. The best way I could describe that is if you had people sitting outside, if there was a river right outside in the parking lot, right, you'd need three different people. You would need somebody that runs to the city and says, hey, stop. And if there was kids drowning in the river and you just kept hearing of that, or women, or something happening, you need people that ran to the city and say, hey, stop going down there. It's dangerous, right? So we do a lot of that. We do a lot of prevention and education and training, because it's a lot easier to stop a kid from being trafficked than it is to try and help them when they've been abused 10 times a day. Okay, so we spend a lot of time and energy just talking about this and trying to prevent it from happening. And then you're going to need people that are willing to go dive in the water. And that's what's amazing with your first responders. And you have the people in our community that are putting their life on the line to dive in the water and rescue those kids, right? And then finally you need recovery services. And so that's what we've been focusing mostly on, is we're kind of that team that's at the edge of the river. And when someone gets rescued, we say, hey, you're safe. We're here for you. We want to help you get stable. We want to help you find hope. And that's really what we focus on. And so we're excited to be able to expand. We do outreach. We have the safe housing, but really a lot of that is more involved in the recovery services. Does that make sense? So that's kind of what we are. We were a long-term program. We would have women from all over the United States fly in and go through our 9-month program and then 9 months of transitional housing. But what we found is that most of the organizations that are getting into long-term care, they're getting women that are not ready to go into their long-term care programs. And there was not much of an alternative. So women that would get rescued had no immediate place to go. And so they would say, I'm ready to go into a long-term care program. They'd show up to your long-term care program and they're high on fentanyl and meth. Right? And so we've become a bridge for people that are coming directly out of trafficking, and then we help them get stable, and then we help get them into vetted long-term emergency or long-term programs. And so that's what we focus on at the moment, and that's what we've been doing, and we're really excited. And we've been able to, just in that transition, help about 85 women, I think 89 this year, just through different services and different phone calls, and being able to help them get in and help them get referrals and things like that. So God's moving, God's doing some amazing things, and we're excited just to be a part of it. So I want to talk a little bit about what sex trafficking is. How many of you guys have seen the Sound of Freedom movie? Okay. How many of you guys have seen Taken? I Will Find You, right? How many of you, when you think of sex trafficking, you think of kidnapping in containers? Honestly. right? Is that what kind of goes through your head? That's what went through my head when I first got into this. And so when you first hear sex trafficking, your brain thinks kidnapping, containers, and I'll be honest with you, about 3% of all trafficking cases are kidnapping cases. So when your sheriff gets up here and says, hey, listen, we actually don't have that big of a problem with the kidnapping side of it, that's a good thing, right? But about 60% of all cases, I'm going to get into that a little bit, are more through like a Romeo pimp where somebody is going to groom a kid or groom a woman and let them know that, think that they love them, they want to take care of them, and then all of a sudden, hey, now that I've done this for you, you need to do this for me. Does that make sense? And so we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. So sex trafficking is actually the use of force, fraud, or coercion to cause somebody to perform a commercial sex act. And if you cause a minor to perform a commercial sex act, it's immediately sex trafficking, right? But if you're an adult, there needs to be force, fraud, or coercion. So we'll dive into that a little bit tonight. But does that make sense? I want you to understand, like the difference between sex work and sex trafficking is sex trafficking, there's force, fraud, or coercion. Sex work means somebody gets to choose who they're doing this stuff with. They are choosing to work at the strip club. They're not there through force. They're not being coerced to it. They get to pick who they do stuff with. They get to keep the money. Sex trafficking is somebody's usually selling them, and there's force. They've been tricked or manipulated, or they're being threatened. If they don't do X, Y, Z, they don't get to see their kids and stuff like that. So when I say we work specifically with sex trafficking survivors in the United States, that's who we work with, are women that have been forced into the commercial sex acts, been manipulated or tricked or told that they're gonna, fly down to Vegas or fly down to Florida and have a modeling job, only to find out that they're now being drugged and sold. And then finally, a lot of coercion or threats of force, threats of if you do not sell X amount of yourself today, you do not get to see your kids. Does that make sense? That's what I'm talking about when I say sex trafficking. So that's what we do as an organization. A commercial sex act. A lot of times people will think, well, in order to be sex trafficking, you must have to be in prostitution, right? That's not true. A commercial sex act could be pornography or any sexual act done in exchange for any item of value, such as money, drugs, shelter, food, or clothing. Do you kind of see how that expands? And we were having some good conversations, me and the sheriff, and just going through some of that, because I think when somebody asks him, they're usually meaning, hey, do we have kids getting kidnapped? You're going to have a much, like he said, your kids are you're going to have a much less chance of being kidnapped than being coerced or groomed on their phone. Right? And there's an app, and I'll say this at the end, but I'll say it again. I would love everybody to know. It's called Bark, like a dog, B-A-R-K. And I think every parent needs to know what this app is, and you need to have it on your phone, and it allows you to track everything that your kids are doing, who they're talking to, and based on their age and based on conversation, you can adjust the settings. But the biggest thing that you can do as parents is just know who your kids are talking to online. And if you're a father, date your daughter. Be in her life. Let her know that you love her. Let her know her value is so much more than what she can give a man sexually. Because if you don't do that, somebody is going to tell her that's her value. And sex trafficking doesn't just randomly happen. Sex trafficking starts in the junior high hallway when young men are told they're literally, everything is trying to get them addicted to pornography, to start looking at women as objects. And as soon as you hit junior high, it's like society screaming at you as a young girl, the most important thing about you is your sexuality, your body, and what you can give a man sexually. And we have got to do a better job of, as a culture, of letting these young women know their value and letting men know that they're supposed to be more protectors of women, not predators. And it's almost like culture is trying to groom kids to do that. So when you're a young man and all of a sudden you're addicted to porn, I started looking at porn when I was 9, right? I'm 35. This isn't, and now it's easier and easier on your phone. And so when you start looking at a woman as an object, and now you got women looking at themselves as objects, it becomes simple for somebody to all of a sudden be like, you know what, this isn't working for me. Let's go buy an escort. And now all of a sudden you have an escort that might be forced or tricked or manipulated into the sex industry, and now you're fueling you're fueling this industry, right? Or you're addicted to pornography and you don't realize that maybe that girl on the other side of that screen is being forced, frauded, or coerced into performing that video for you, and you don't understand that your addiction is actually fueling sex trafficking. It is the fastest growing criminal industry in the world. It's you got drug sales, human trafficking, weapons and arms sales. These are some very broad statistics. There's an estimated 35 million people every day are victims of sex trafficking worldwide. 20% or 7 million of those are children. I want to stay on that for a second. When you think of sex trafficking, you think it's kids being kidnapped. 80% of trafficking cases are adult women. Right? I'm not saying it doesn't happen to kids. And most kids nowadays, there's statistics of 1 in 3 girls will be sexually abused by the time they're 18, and 1 out of 5 boys will be sexually abused by they're 18. So a lot of this starts when they're young. But I want to point that out, is a lot of the trafficking cases are actually adult women. And then this is kind of crazy. 50% of the world's sex trafficking actually happens in Northern America, and they include Greenland for some weird reason, and Canada in that statistic. So we have a really big problem with addiction in our culture, right? How many of you guys just know, like when you walk in the mall, it's hard to not just even go down the street on the freeway without getting hit without sexual images hitting you, let alone on your phone or going in the mall. It's just everywhere we go, our culture is just so overly sexualized. Does it happen in our area? Yes, it does. And here's just different things that I've talked about happen in our area. I will go over this a little bit more. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a little more familiar with Spokane. And we showed you there was about 6,000 victims from 2007 that have been identified. And when I was getting into this in 2016, there was a sheriff on our side of the border over there named Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich. And Sheriff and I sat down, and he said, Caleb, I just did a sting to see if anybody would hit. We put a sting out there, and we had a woman detective say she had a 9-year-old, 11-year-old, and a 12-year-old for sale, and over 1,000 people responded to buy those kids. And I think you have maybe done stings in the past too, and he can even say, like, you can track that. But we do have a lot of problem over in Spokane with people wanting to buy minors. And it's a real big problem. And so that's kind of what got us into it. There's this statistic from 2021 to 22. Idaho saw a 271% increase in human trafficking according to data. I will say, I think you guys are starting to track it more. And as we are growing and as we're learning and as we're building relationship with your sheriff's department, we want to do our best to be able to say, hey, here's how many phone calls we're getting, here's how many people we're seeing. Down the road, our dream would be to actually have like an outpatient place over here with professional counselors and advocates. So if there is something happening here and people are being trafficked or being abused, we have professional staff that can do that. And if they need more inpatient care, we'll take them over to our side of the border and get them into our program. But our hope is just to be able to help do some training and some things to kind of keep your area safe. And we have worked with women from North Idaho, and a lot of the times they're just not going to contact the police department. I'm just being honest with you. And he knows that, the sheriff's department will know that. And that's part of our dream as an agency as we grow, is that we want to be able to build a good relationship with our law enforcement so that we can have trained advocates that maybe go out on things like that and help in that situation. But in no way are we sitting here trying to bash the police department. I think it's amazing that you actually know how many kidnapping cases, you know who they are, you know their name, you know their parents. So I would give kudos to him for that, because that is not our situation over in Spokane. When I meet with the sheriff, it's overwhelming. So I think that's amazing. But I want you guys to understand, like, when you look at the broader terminology of what's going on and what sex trafficking is, it's also when people ask me how many sex traffickers are in your area, it's kind of like asking me how many drug dealers are in your area. Nobody's walking down the street going, it's me, But you can tell that it's happening. We get the phone calls, we get the people that come in that need help and want to talk with us. So breaking that down. So what is force, fraud, or coercion? I'm going to make sure I'm honoring you guys' time here because I can go a little bit winded on the communicating. Examples of force. This is what I mean by that. So that would be physical abuse, sexual violence, verbal or emotional abuse, brandishing weapons, caged, locked in rooms or barred cells, kidnapped. That's what I mean by force. And if you look at the percentages, you're going to see like 3% are the kidnap situations like that. It does happen. But I think sometimes Hollywood can sensationalize a little bit of what's happening, where most of the time what I'm dealing with is I'm dealing with the physical abuse, the sexual violence, the verbal, emotional abuse. Examples of fraud, that would be a promise of a job is the number one way that people get tricked into this, is a promise of a job or promise of a romantic relationship. And again, that's why it's so important. And I'm gonna read something at the end of this, is actually from a book that pimps use to learn how to pimp women and trick them and manipulate into them, because I want you to understand the mindset that there really are people out there that are trained on this, and they're looking to find young girls, they're looking to find women that really want love and attention, and they use that to exploit them. Something that's God-given, something that's inside of all of us to have relationship, and they use it and they manipulate, and it's terrifying and it's sickening, but it's a real thing that happens. Promise of drugs, promise of material possessions, promise of essential resources. Coercive means, this would be, hey, if you don't do X, Y, Z, we will not pay you. You're not going to be able to see your kids. These are all things, and I will tell you that almost every woman we work with, they've dealt with multiple things of this. We have other trainings that go into this in more depth, but mostly what our staff is trained on is complex trauma. When you think of trauma, you'd think, man, one of those would be traumatizing. Well, when you have dealt with like 6 out of the 10, that is very complex trauma. And so our staff are actually trained professionally on how to work with people that are coming out of that. We've seen miraculous stuff. We've seen women that come out of DID or a multiple personality disorder that get healed. God's actually healed them. Sometimes when you're abused so much, and most of the time they're abused 5 to 10 times a day, when you're being, kids are gone. I'm just going to use the word rape. If you're being raped 5 to 10 times a day, that is a significant trauma that you go through. Okay, I don't want to sugarcoat that. This is what this is. And sometimes they will literally disassociate from the traumas, almost as a way of God allowing them to get through that trauma. And then we run into that situation where people think there's no hope, and we're actually seeing God heal those people, and it's amazing to see him do that. What sex trafficking is not. Sex trafficking is not smuggling. And sex trafficking is not sex work. And what I mean by that is oftentimes I get asked, when you hear the word sex trafficking, your brain immediately goes to the border right now, right? Because our border is a disaster. I've been down there. I've been to Houston and met with some of the organizations. Houston's got a really horrible problem right now. They got women coming they have over 500 massage parlors that people are just getting ran through. I've been down to seeing rape trees where they actually will smuggle them across the border. They'll handcuff them, abuse them at the trees, throw their lingerie up as trophies. I've seen the pictures of that. It's a horrendous thing that's going on. But I think what happens is smuggling is more about transportation and trafficking is more about exploitation. You do not have to be smuggled or have to go across the border to be trafficked. You can be trafficked in your own city by your own parents, right? But what happens is oftentimes people that are smuggled end up being trafficked. And so our brain goes, human trafficking is human smuggling. Does that make sense? But it's not the case. And a lot of the people we work with, a lot of women we work with, they've never been kidnapped. They've never been smuggled across borders. Now, if you're going to be moving girls across state lines, if I'm understanding, it becomes federal. And so that does happen quite a bit. We do have quite a lot of women that will end up in escort services that will end up from Portland and end up to here in Coeur d'Alene and Spokane, and that does happen. But I want to make that clear, right? It's not smuggling. It's not sex work. And sex work, trafficking involves exploiting, and human smuggling involves provision of a service, typically transportation or fraudulent documents to an individual who voluntarily seeks to gain a legal entry to a foreign country. And oftentimes the smuggling will turn into a trafficking situation. Sex work. When a person is willingly taking part in the sale of sex, it's consensual. That's sex work. And sex work, they get to keep the money, they get to choose who, they get to choose when, and that's kind of the main difference between sex work and sex trafficking. Types of sex work could include pornography, street work, strip clubs, exotic dancing, truck stops, massage parlors, internets, hotel alcohol, escort services, sex tourism. There's a lot of different ways of commercial sex work, right? So it's not just the girl that you see on the street. And to be honest with you, as a kid, you would see people in Spokane walking down the street, and I used to think, oh, she's a prostitute. Now I go, oh my gosh, is she safe? And is somebody doing that to her? Does that make sense? Like, my own vision of how I see people has shifted and changed from doing this work and realizing that many of them are not choosing this, and there's usually a reason behind their situation. These are the four main kind of traffickers. The main one is that boyfriend, and that's what we were talking about, is they're going to prey on young women or girls in person or online. They're going to make them feel safe. They're going to make them feel accepted. They're going to try and make them feel like they're their boyfriend and love them. I have got multiple stories of that, someone dear to my heart. That was her situation. 13, mom and dad got divorced. An older gentleman said, I'm going to take care of you. Your dad doesn't care about you. Bought her stuff, took her out to eat, made her feel like he really cared about her, only to then drive her to try and trick her and say, hey, I have this beautiful house in LA. Look at all the cars I got. Look at the bougie lifestyle. She's thinking, oh, this is amazing. He drives her, and as soon as they get to Bend, Oregon, he then tells her, like, hey, this is what it's going to be. Every time she tries to escape, he beats her and throws her in ice baths. She was able to escape at some point, but now she's addicted to drugs and went through a lot of trauma. And so that's a main way that we see that. A recruiter, a lot of traffickers will actually get girls to train them on what they would call being a bottom girl, to go out and recruit on behalf of them. So sometimes we'll see that. They'll go into schools or they'll go into the colleges, and all of a sudden they're flaunting their money, and then they'll try and actually say, if you just go on these dates with these guys, you can make this money too. That one's hard. The enabler's kind of like the boyfriend, but instead of trying to go through the whole relationship thing, he's just looking for girls that are already partying, clubbing, on drugs. Now he's saying, hey, I'll offer you all the fentanyl you need. You come with me, you do X, Y, Z, I'll take care of you. And then finally, the violent pimp is what we usually think of when we think of trafficking, and that's not typically what we deal with. And so that does happen. Oftentimes, all of these can become violent, but that's kind of it. And then to just kind of talk about what the sheriff was talking about, I want you to see that top 4 ways, 85% that traffickers will lure victim is online. And during COVID, it went up like 250%. So knowing who your kids are talking to is so important, and teaching kids not to add people. I was on Snapchat, he briefly mentioned that, but I was with a detective, and he was showing me how he could go into a school. He would add a bunch of the guys on the baseball team, and then all of a sudden he'd start adding girls, and the girls would be like, oh, well, this guy, he'd make a fake profile of him being like a good-looking 16-year-old, and he's a 45-year-old detective. And as soon as the girl would add them, if they had their location services on, he could see exactly where that girl was at. We cannot be talking to people unless we know who they are. And that's why, again, the Bark app is going to be something that I would highly recommend. And then finally, I want to read this as we wrap up. This is actually from a book called The Pimp Game. And this is going to probably be a little bit hard to listen to. I don't know any other way to kind of let this sink in, but this is literally a book that they train out of. And it says, they don't look at these girls as women, they call them hoes. So it says, a hoe's desire can't be fed because she has a need that isn't material. She needs security, love, acceptance, confirmation of one's self-worth. Just as young men join gangs for the same reasons, a hoe exchanges something she can see for something she can't. This leaves the door open for exploitation, misuse, and abuse. A Mac will sell her a dream like a manager promised to take her to Hollywood and make her a star. By the time she realized she's been had, she's already trapped. But she must want something, be it fame, stardom, love, money, respect, security. In order to be a hoe, she must want something. That something is what she's willing to sacrifice all to have. That one thing, that need, is what you must obtain before she does. You then sell it to her for her soul. If she wants fame, love, it doesn't matter. You make her believe you can and will give her all these things. This is what they do. And I've interviewed some of them. One of the guys in particular got saved in prison. I interviewed him. He said, that's what we do. We just find a girl that needed attention, that wanted something. We would tell her that we could give it to her no matter what it is, and then we would try and get her to sell her soul for that, and we would make money off of her. So that's what we do at Helping Captives. That's what we're doing. That's what we're trying to accomplish through our facility. We're going to be able to double the amount of people that we help through that facility. It will also allow us to have outpatient. And more importantly, I think it's a message to our country that we want to be a place that is known for healing women, not exploiting them. And so the first thing we did when we bought that building was we called all the men of the community that were willing to come, and we did a worship service. We dedicated the building to the Lord. We smashed the stages. We removed that. We repented, and we dedicated the building to the Lord. And then we had the women come in for a women's service, and it was an amazing healing time. And so now we're at that point where we're going to be doing trying to start the remodeling process, and we need funding to be able to do that. And we did have access to $1 million grant. We were voted to come in and grab it, but they said if we used the money, it had to be used for secular use only, which meant we could not do any type of worship services in the building, which obviously we are not going to do. So again, bottom line, as we're just finishing up here, there's a lot of women that never get rescued, and when they do, they need services, and they need people that love them and that can give them good professional care. That's what we do. You can speak up. That's the number one thing we can do as a community is we need to talk about this. We need to speak up. If you're seeing things or hearing stuff, it's okay to be like, hey, this doesn't feel right. This seems off. My granddaughter's on her phone a little too much. She's talking to people I don't know. The main way that you save somebody is by speaking up, by letting people know what's going on in the community, by letting them know what we're doing. And then finally, for us, ways that you can help. You can pray for us. You can spread the word. You can share our social media, connect with your school, your church organization, decrease demand, vote. Voting is a huge deal. You can give financially. And then finally, if you're in the Valley, you can go to our thrift store. And then we just launched a Helping Captives coffee company. So if you're a Christian, like any good Christian, and you have a Christian drug sale problem, and you're addicted to coffee and you would like the coffee sent to your house, that's what we do. So we're in the Christian drug sale business, and the girls learn how to roast the coffee, and it's been a good time. So thank you guys so much. And then finally, I think we're just going to do question and answer time. Thank you so much for your time.
This question is for Sheriff Norris. You mentioned sextortion is a real issue here in Kootenai County. Can you give us a feel of approximately how many cases are reported per year to your department? And can you walk us through what the Sheriff's Department does once a parent brings you a report of such an incident?
Yeah, so we work very, very closely with our Attorney General's Office of Internet Crimes Against Children. They have experts that can track down the IP addresses, and that's a very, very time-consuming investigation. It generally takes a few months. So we work very closely with them. In Idaho, we've tracked down about 2,400 leads 2 years ago, but that has jumped up to about 3,500 now. So we're following up on a lot of those here in Kootenai County, and we fully investigate every tip and lead that we get on these types of offenses. There is not a peace officer in Kootenai County that would not do anything they can do to protect a child. So we follow up, and we have quite a bit of prosecutions on them.
Thanks, Bob. Okay, so Jason, do you have a question in the room? Okay, right in front of you. Perfect.
Thank you for coming tonight. This is so heartbreaking. But I won't say you're preaching to the choir, but young people need to hear this. Do you have an opportunity to go into high schools? Are the school districts welcoming you, or the government? Is there a problem with not being able to have young people hear this and see your presentation?
Yeah, we do. We do try and get into schools. We have to alter it a little bit, just because we're a ministry, and so there's some balance there to be able to do that. But we've spoken at a few high schools and are always open to doing that. And that's my main priority. So as an organization, we're always trying to balance how much of this needs to go into prevention, how much of it needs to go into recovery services. We felt as a board, we really needed to push hard on prevention. So we've actually built trainings. We have 4 that we were rotating. We now are trying to get them online because we're realizing people would rather be in their pajamas at home and just go through the training than maybe show up. And then we have specific trainings for hospitals, first responders, different things like that. And then we have a specific training for kids that I will do at youth groups and at schools. So anytime that door opens open, that's my heart. My background is in youth ministry. So anytime a door like that opens up, we will jump all over that.
Caleb,
Thanks,
can I
Caleb.
add something to that?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Bob.
This needs to be a community conversation that we're having. That this needs to be part of a conversation that we have with neighbors, needs to be part of a conversation we have in community service organizations. This cell phone is exploiting our children and exposing them to higher risk to be sexual assault victims and lead a horrible life in the future. This cell phone right here.
Yeah.
So we need to have a complete community conversation at every level. All of our school resource officers do have a segment of the threat of the internet, but our parents need to be involved. You know, the parents of children need to be involved to know what apps that they have, if they even have a phone. Yeah. Quite honestly,
We have a whole hour training, just so you understand. We have an entire hour training on how to keep your kids safe online, and we go through the apps and different things like that.
And I think parents need to start thinking about, maybe you don't need a phone just because other kids have a phone. It's a real option. It's a real option.
Okay, so Caleb, I want to tap down on something you said
Get
to
smart
me
and get
earlier.
a dumb phone. That's what
You
we
had
need
made
to
the
do.
comment that a lot of parents in Kootenai County, for example, would be really nervous about letting their son or daughter go play at the park or run down the street on their scooter.
Yeah.
But you said that the real threat isn't the street. You want to elaborate on that just for a minute?
Yeah, I think I tried to do that, but I think, look, these are national statistics where you have about like 3% are kidnapping cases. Okay, so when I say nationally, that means they're taking Spokane, and let's just be honest, Coeur d'Alene's a little different city than Spokane, and so I want you to look at the numbers and look at about 85% of those cases come through online, and about 3% of those come through kidnapping. I think when you watch the movies, you can immediately be terrified. And I have little children. This is what I do for a living. So I hear the worst of the worst, stuff that I would never even repeat to you, right? And so you have to have that balance. So are we crazy? Are we dumb and just let our kids go stay the night at other people's houses? No, we're very strict on who is with our kids and who they're with. But at the same time, we can't live in fear. And I think that's the balance, is that you guys have a safe neighborhood, but at the same time, you don't want to be ignorant. You don't want to be irresponsible. You need to know who your kids are with. Most all sexual abuse happens from somebody they know. And you need to be aware of who your kids are talking to, and it's okay to say no. But I would not be, we also can't just be like completely have our head in the sand on this, but we also can't be completely living in fear where we don't live or we don't function or we don't go to the park and things like that.
Thanks,
So,
Caleb. Good.
if that makes sense.
Quick question for you then, Bob, if I may, and then I'm going to go to Sarah. Do we have any missing persons in Kootenai County that we haven't been able to find? Do we have numbers and calculus there?
I do. Let me give you a typical year of what we're looking at, and then I'll give you a couple specifics. So in 2023, we had 27 incidents that would fall under human trafficking. Of those 27 incidents, now I did not take sex crimes against children that they knew the suspect. So
like a family member or something like
correct,
that? Correct,
or a known suspect. So in 2023, we had 27. 22 of those cases were to have found no nexus to any type of sexual assault. So a relative either abducted or took a child or an adult. One female drug user agreed to have sex for a ride, and then she changed her mind, and then the victim became uncooperative during the investigation. So that was closed, no further action. We had a male and female left a party. Female alleged sexual assault. However, we did find some evidence at a local gas station that proved her allegation wrong. So that is an example of a year. We did have another event where a Delivery Eats driver said that she was kidnapped and that it was actually a neighbor who was confronting her for driving too fast and then told her to park her car in a certain area. But technically, that is a kidnapping. We had a male and a female were arrested at a gas station for solicitation. They both agreed that one was the customer, one was the prostitute, and they were both arrested. And we do have a female adult who left Kootenai County, and the mother found her. The mother picked her up on her way to back home to Kootenai County. She said that I was sexually trafficked in Georgia and Arizona. So the mom took her to a Salt Lake City hospital, and they ended up not doing a sexual assault kit. They made it back here to Kootenai County, and then the female adult is now living still missing. She's missing again, but she's known to frequent the Las Vegas area. Now, I have a horrible case. I do have a horrible case, and it's heart-wrenching. It's horrible. But we do have a underage child that has said, this is the lifestyle I want to live. And he or she has ran away a few times. And he or she is found in Los Angeles and in Portland. But this is the lifestyle she wants to live. Now, that is a whole nother dynamic from a law enforcement standpoint. That is something where Caleb's people can really, do some deep diving. But right now, that individual doesn't want help, but there is a nexus, and it all started with this.
Thanks, Bob.
This is destroying our youth.
Okay, Sarah.
This question is for Caleb. When we think about women working at clubs like Showgirls, we as a society tend to think of daddy issues. I know that's an oversimplification of the problem, but it makes me think. Are there common issues or backgrounds you're finding in women who end up in the industry?
Yeah, I can't tell where you're at.
She's over here.
Oh,
This is an
It's
online
an online
question.
question, so
Oh.
you can look at the camera if you
yeah,
want.
there definitely are some things that they're common that we would see as time goes on, and a lot of that would be lack of fathers, lack of good relationships, feeling like this is all they're good for. It was heartbreaking for me after the men's night. We actually had some women protest our event, and it was amazing that they actually showed up, because they thought us removing the stages was us like hating them, And so we actually were able to talk with them and have a good conversation, and there were some tears, and actually in the spokesman review you can see pictures of us having a smiling face and taking photos. And afterward we let them come into the club, and they walked back into the room where they get ready, and it's their locker room. And to me, I'm sitting in this room, it's very gross, it's baby powder and glitter all over the place, and it's not very nice to me. But she's weeping, and she's over in the corner just crying, and this was her booth where she would get ready. And she just said, she's like, this to me, all she's ever known is this is her value, this is her worth. And so in her mind, this is, at least here, she had she had people that were looking out for her. She had bouncers that would try and protect her. She had other girls that she could do this with. She felt like she had her family, and she felt like she lost her family when the club closed down. But to me, you're sitting there going, her mind isn't thinking, oh, we lost the club, I need to go find another career choice. Her mind now goes, I lost the club, I'm now going to have to do sex work on the street, which is more dangerous. And so I think when you do that, you notice there's some things that happen, but then you also have other women that choose this. You have women that are trying to go through college, and I think we've just told women, like, if you want to make money, take your clothes off. And I think as a culture, we just need to do better at that. So to sit there and say there's one particular reason why somebody gets into sex work isn't fair.
Thanks, Caleb.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Murray.
So we have one here, and then Art McAmer has one over there on that side.
Okay, that'll probably do it for us today. We've got about 4 minutes now. So
this one's pretty quick for Sheriff Norris. You were talking about how you're able to sometimes track down these people, these predators online, and I was just curious if they're hiding behind VPNs, and are you able to overcome that, or is that something where when they do something like that, you just can't do anything about it?
Yeah, we've been pretty successful. However, a lot of these suspects are not 17-year-olds out of Lewiston. They're out of the country, and they're getting these pictures, and then they're selling them on the dark web. But we do have quite a few that are here locally, child pornography or enticing situations in which we prosecute. So we could certainly use more experts in the online and search warrants of IP addresses and what have you. So we're looking to expand that, because this problem, unfortunately, is only going to get worse.
Thanks, Bob. Okay, Art, you got the last question of the night.
Thank you. Sheriff, I know prevention, a large part of prevention is deterrence. And I'm one that's never been squeamish about a good public hanging. So before Matt tells us how much he needs for the remodel, I wanted to ask you, what are the penalties for this kind of stuff? Because it sounds like they're not harsh enough, because it keeps happening.
Yeah, I scratch my head at some of the sentencing that occurs here within our Kootenai County judicial system. You will have one situation with strengths and weaknesses of the same case, and you will have a judge give 15 years. You'll have a different judge, same strengths and weaknesses of the case, and you get probation. And this has really happened. This has really happened. And I have to say, I stand behind Stan Mortensen, our prosecutor, who is actually putting this stuff online on what these judges are giving these predators here, and I support that 100%. So here's where I'd like to go, and here's where we're having this discussion in the Idaho Sheriff Association. We need to put mandatory minimums in these sentencing guidelines. So any person guilty of this should be sentenced to X, because this discretion that some of these judges have, some of the prosecutors that are working over here are scratching their head. We are scratching our head on why some of these light sentences. So,
Indeed.
Paul,
Okay,
can we-
Caleb. last question, I guess, is you're trying to raise quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
And so what does that look like? That is one of the reasons you're here tonight.
Yeah.
We do want to help you. Obviously, it's going to be a small participation in the big picture, but you have a table in the lobby. They can come talk to you as well.
Yeah.
But I think I recall the numbers. You want to scare everyone?
Yeah. I wish I had some before and after pictures. So the whole entire remodel would be about $2.5 million to do the whole entire thing. But in that, we've been blessed. We've had some people that are like, hey, once you get to that point, we want to throw in windows, want to throw in HVAC. And so it's amazing when you see what the community will come along and do. Obviously, when I'm looking for grants, I'm going, hey, give me the like worst case scenario. What's this going to cost? And then the first step that we were really praying and believing for was the building itself and the lot and everything was about 1.2, and we talked them down to about, I think, about $950,000. And so we've paid off a good chunk of that, and about $350,000 of that we've already paid off, and we have some money in our account because we're going to start doing the asbestos checks and then start the remodel. But we have about another $550,000, $600,000 that we would love to just pay the building off completely and then just start the remodeling. So that would be our wish, would be to just kind of pay the whole thing off, own it outright, and then start the remodeling process. But if that's not God's will, then we are in the process now of we're going to start remodeling it. So that's where we're at.
Good, good. Caleb, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks,
sharing
man.
with us. Sheriff, thank you.
Thank
We
you.
pray, guys, before we let you go. So, Lord, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for our sheriff. Thank you for the privilege of hearing from him, putting a little bit of focus in our own community. And obviously, we can see we have a broken judicial system in many ways. We need correction there, and we need to address that for certain. Lord, I thank you also for Caleb and his team and for what they're doing through helping captives. We've talked a little bit about buildings and remodels, but it's also an expense just to serve one man or one woman. And we certainly want to be a part of that with all the churches in our county and the churches in Spokane County. And as far reaching as, Lord, you will allow them to send this message and share this need. And so, Lord, bless their work. Bless these men and women that have already been through their program. Give them continued and full deliverance, and allow them to become then the missionary force to serve the others that are out on the mission field. We do pray for our law enforcement here in our county in particular, that they would have wisdom in the way they handle these things. And Lord, that if there are indeed things happening, even if those numbers are small, we don't want one case, not one. And so, Lord, we pray that you would cause these that are hiding out, these that are doing these kinds of things, to be discovered, prosecuted, and dealt with. And so, Lord, we thank you for it. We thank you for this night. I thank you for these that are here tonight in the room. I thank you for those watching online. Use us all for your glory, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. God bless you guys.